'Twas the night before Christmas and all the other bullshit. Guys, it is less than 24 hours until the launch of Season of Mastery. I could not be more excited. I've been saying on the show, I can't stop thinking about this thing. I am living, eating, breathing, drinking Season of Mastery, and I'm not being hyperbolic. Like, I cannot get this fucking thing out of my head, and I love it. So I figured, you know what? For the big swan song, you know, your real push into launch with some friendly voices, I figured we would get some old friends back. And so I'm really, really happy that the three gentlemen I've got here are with me now, given that we're so close to launch. I'll introduce them all to you now. It wouldn't have been sort of, obviously the show's going to keep going through Season of Mastery, but the swan song of the preparation wouldn't be the same without this man, because he was there at the beginning of it as well. North, mate, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It's great to be back. No buzzy mic, no problems.
That's the way. And I'm so happy to welcome back someone who you're friendly with as well, who's been on the show only once. I hate saying that. We'll have to get him back more often, but I love checking in with him when I can. NoHitJerome, mate, what's going on?
What's up? I'm really, really excited for Season of Mastery. I'm honestly completely unprepared, kind of freaking out right now, but just really, really psyched. Happy to be on the podcast as well.
Thanks, man. It's great having you here. And finally, we've got someone who, I mean, as is always my fault, guys, has not been on the show for a fucking long time, even though we've been chatting over the last, God knows what, 15 months since he's last been on. You know, we talk in little back channels here and there. Nano, mate, how are you?
Man, it's good to be back, Josh. I'm excited for Season of Mastery. The fresh bug has gotten me again, unfortunately, and here we go back again, heading to Cold Ridge Valley, leveling up a gnome warlock. I'm ready to go.
That's the way. Well, look, mate, we might actually start off on that point that you've just raised there, whether it be intentionally or not. It is the fresh bug. Guys, I've got no notes for this particular chat, so I really wanted to go. We're playing jazz here tonight. I just want to go freeform, baby. We're scatting, all right? I want to see where we go with this one. And you three gents are as excited for Season of Mastery as I am. You're all super positive on it. We'll get through the points again through this talk as to what you might be focusing on within the Season of Mastery that really does get the juices flowing for you. But now that Nano said, you know, the fresh fever, if you will, is something that you've all caught along with myself. You know, I woke up this morning and again, as I've been doing every day, spending an ungodly amount of time on the WoW Classic subreddit. Even to this day, the day before launch, I'm still seeing all the comments from people who just really, really either want this thing to fail, are predicting that it will fail, and are just saying all the same fucking things that we heard the retail crowd say about Classic before it launched. You're not going to like it. None of you are going to be playing it in a fucking month. This is all bullshit, blah, blah, blah. Nano, I'll start with you, and you're someone who's obviously got such a background in the private server scene and is very, very cognizant of fresh fever. Tell me what you think when you hear comments like that from people who don't quite get the appeal of re-rolling fresh, even in as close a time proximity as we've got to the end of Classic.
Yeah, the fresh, private servers lived on fresh. I mean, I started playing private servers like 10 and a half years ago when I got tired of, I don't know, Mists, I think it was at the time. And was just looking to go back to the original game. And I played, this is probably, the Season Mastery would probably be like my 6th or 7th fresh server of vanilla, if you include Classic along the way. And there's just something about the initial launch period of this game, of Classic, where everyone's back in the starting zones, everyone's back at level 1, and the whole world's ahead of you, and you know it's coming, and you can prepare for it, but this time you're a little smarter. This time you have a little bit more preparation. This time you feel like you can conquer that thing a little bit faster, and there's a lot of joy in, at least for me, I'm the kind of guy that goes back and plays the same games over and over and over again, whether it's World of Warcraft or, you know, Zelda or Final Fantasy games or whatever it is. I'm playing them over and over, and it's the same thing for vanilla WoW for me, is that this fresh opportunity to play again is really fun.
Very good. North, let me throw it over to you, mate, and just say, you know, when we hear Nano saying something like, whether it be his 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th iteration of Vanilla Fresh, doing it over and over again. I'm a recent convert to Fresh Fever, and I'm certainly someone who does see the appeal now of just going over and over and over again. And people are scratching their heads going, how fucked in the head do you have to be to want to play the same game over and again, particularly an MMO? But it was something that I became so cognizant of very early in that TBC run, whereas like I likes what I like. I know what I like, and it ain't this. I want to go back. I know now why there were all those thousands of signatures on that petition to get vanilla forever. Tell me what you would say to the naysayers going, what the fuck is wrong with you?
I think there's a lack of appreciation for sorry, someone's calling my Discord. But I think there's a lack of appreciation that people have for like what Fresh presents in terms of novelty, because I think a lot of people, right, do really live and breathe the sense of novelty as in terms of what drives them in game and how it makes. One second, can you throw it to Jerome? I'm being actually spammed in Discord right now.
It's okay, mate. We'll come back to you, Jerome.
Hey,
I'll ask you the same
here.
question, man. What would you say to the naysayers out there saying, mate, there's something wrong with you if you want to play this game again? You're a weirdo. What are you doing?
Well, I think it just kind of shows gaming as a whole. I mean, we're looking at every single game that comes out seems to be some kind of service game now. We've got Path of Exile and RuneScape's seasonal based now in a way. Every game seems to be season based. I mean, you've got Fortnite, you've got Apex Legends, Call of Duty. Everything is season based now. So I don't think it's weird to have a relaunch of an MMO. I feel like it's just kind of the logical next step. And if people want it, and I definitely want it, then I think it makes a lot of sense. And from a business perspective, it makes a ton of sense because you're just releasing the same thing over and over again, ideally with some small changes and improvements. Diablo, of course, another good example, probably started it all. So yeah, I'm really into the seasonal based idea. I really wanted this myself personally. And yeah, I'm just a huge fan of the idea of season based gaming and kind of reinvigorating the hype every single year, every single season of something that might have been, kind of old news before.
Very good. North, you're back in. I'll throw it back to you, mate, to pick up from where you were.
Sorry.
And adding in the mix of what Jerome was saying there of maybe, as we're saying with WoW is the future seasonal gaming. We shall see. But sorry, mate, pick up from where you were.
So I think that there's a novelty to each Fresh that really is important, right? Because it's not, I think Nano touched on the fact that, right, like it is exciting to sort of challenge yourself to do better, right? Like, and I think, for a lot of Freshes, that's what people have done, right? This is maybe my 6th Fresh, I think. And so, right, like, up until this point, I've really, I really have challenged myself, right? Like, I'm going to level faster. I'm going to get more gold initially. I'm going to get my Priebus faster. I'm going to, do X and Y and Z differently. And I think that is a fun thing to do, but I'm not sure it's as fun as sort of adapting to the new landscapes and the new realities, because with each Fresh, inevitably, there is some sort of difference, right? Be it on private service where it's, progressive itemization here, an earlier honor system, or tier 2 changes here. It could be that rankings out from day one and BGs are out from day one. It could be that they're not, right? So, adapting to those changes and adapting to the new enemies, the new faces that you see, right? The new dynamics on servers, right? Like, because, things rise and fall so much in those early few weeks and months. And so you have, a server developing its identity. Things aren't set into stone, right? People can make a name for themselves on servers when they haven't before. So everything is so much more malleable. The routines aren't as set in stone. And so you get this, I think, it's a much more pliable experience early on that really is so appealing. And it's the best parts of the game where, you have so much to do and you have so much to say and to grind and really to work with your friends to create, or, even on yourself to create, right? Like every consume that you farm, every arcane crystal that you find, every Lotus that you stumble upon, every piece of gear that you get feels really special because it's at the beginning, right? And I think that's what's so appealing before you get into the, we've got raid on Tuesday, and then I got to farm consumes on Thursday and Friday before it becomes an obligation. It's a genuine interest. And before it becomes a routine, it is that novelty. And I think that that's part of what makes the experience so fresh and so appealing.
Very well said, mate. Nano, I'll throw it back to you because I've got a unique question for you that doesn't perhaps apply to the other guys quite as much as it does to you. with your background in Nostalrius and all the work that you did there with the team, I don't have to go into it. Everyone should know. If you don't know, Google Nano and Nostalrius, member of the QA team. Mate, you must be so married to that concept of vanilla is vanilla. And we sort of look back now through a slightly different lens at the old, hashtag no changes movement prior to the launch of Classic. And here we are celebrating, or at least, I think the four of us are celebrating. We're part of a group that's very happy with the announced changes for Season of Mastery. I couldn't help but think of you. I mean, I think of you on a regular basis anyway, mate, but I was thinking of you more often than not because I was wondering, I wonder how Nano feels about something as different as we're getting. Now, I know it's not new for a private server to mix things up, so the concept wouldn't be alien to you. But coming from Blizzard and being that quite, big of a deviation from the game that you love and were such a big proponent of, how do you feel about all of this with in terms of changes?
Yeah, I've never been a no changes acolyte, so to speak. I fully recognize that there are flaws in the vanilla game that can be addressed through smart design changes. And I advocated for a lot of them all throughout Classic on my Twitter page and to Blizzard developers directly. Things like the honor system I think are terrible. I think it's just a dog shit system. And I'd love to see them go further with those changes. There's all kinds of things. And so what Blizzard is doing with Season of Mastery is actually something I wish I had the opportunity to have done on Nostalrius long term. Like the goal was eventually Nostalrius would, we might revisit vanilla and make changes to the different boss encounters and to change things up a little bit and to make a fresh server actually a fresh experience when you walk into the raids. So the changes that they're making to the raid encounters, making it more difficult, adding health values, taking away world buffs, that's the thing that excites me the most about Season of Mastery is that not Blizzard's not taking the lazy route of just running back the Classic we played already, but they're actually investing time and development resources and QAing it and testing it and seeing if this new difficult Classic is something that people are interested in. And then in a year from now or 18 months or however long until the next season, they might shake it up again and do class rebalancing or maybe even add new content. So I'm really excited about the direction that Blizzard is taking with Season of Mastery, and those changes are actually what excite me the most.
It is really interesting to think of, whether vanilla becomes some bizarre Minecraft-esque like project where we tinker with it enough, what's under the hood every season, and just becomes a sandbox that the developers play with and present to us. I don't know, we shall see. But North, it's been about 3 weeks, I think, since you were last on the show. I think we just dinged 30 on the beta last time we spoke, and so much has happened since then. If I can just ask you, if you can summarize sort of how you felt about and we've gotten such huge news since you and I last spoke. How have you felt about everything? And I'd ask you, and Jerome, I'm going to ask you the same question, so start thinking of your answer as well. North, how have you been with everything? But also, what's your favorite change that they've brought in, number one, and what's your number one least favorite change that they've announced? You there, mate? I can't hear you.
Oh, whoops! I muted myself so that I could exhale into my mic.
I just thought you were being really.
My bad.
I thought you were being really deep and pensive.
No, not me. You've got the wrong guy. But I think that a lot of the changes have been, right, to me, they've been small adjustments. And I've really liked the small adjustments they've made because I think it's reinforced a commitment they have, all of the favorite ones that I have, of making the world a place that people can go to for farming, right? So the nerfing of Dire Maul, and the sort of addition of elementals, be it elemental, I believe it's earth, fire, and I don't know if it's water, but earth and fire at least, to certain herb nodes, to sungrass, and whichever the other one was.
I think they're all dropping from a bunch of stuff. I think water's been reported to be found.
So I think it was fire was on Sungrass, and it wasn't Fire Bloom for some reason, but that might have been changed as well. And then I think people were finding Goldthorn.
Yeah, Goldthorn is popping stuff off. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is really interesting because something that I've always encouraged and I've always really looked to vanilla and sort of future iterations of World of Warcraft that have almost always failed is pushing people back into lower level zones, right? So, and like getting Goldthorn was always important still, right? Because it was still useful for some consumes, but not nearly as important as it's going to be now, right?
Yeah.
And so encouraging these changes to push people back out into the world, I think is a really, really, really good change. My least favorite change by far is the Summoning Stone change. I get it. I think that it'll be slightly abused. I think that it adjusts the routes in which people can, find natural interaction through PvP. I love PvP. So for people on PvE servers, I really get that, this is probably better for them. And really, maybe the most players should be on PvE servers because that's really what they enjoy. For me, I enjoy it less. I think it messes with the sort of organic nature of movement in Classic that's really compelling, unlike, TBC where you have portals, at a major city, right? So you're not interacting with people for those things. And you are just ghetto hearthing everywhere and everything is available to you immediately. And so, right, like I think that it will sort of mess with that flow slightly, but every other change really I've been looking to and been really, really happy about. I still don't think they go far enough. In a lot of cases, right? Like I was like looking at the number of nodes because they were like, oh, we'll increase the number of nodes. I don't think the number of nodes is really high enough to get a high pop server out there, but maybe they're not really balancing around that. And that probably should be taken into account. So, most of it's great though, right? Like I'm really looking forward to being out in the world and, a change that I think I find a little weird that I really like is the 0.5 being added. Yeah. Because now we have this sort of situation in which, right, like essentially, really, the only set that really matters from that, given that ranking gear is out for hardcore players, is Dark Mantle. But it encourages also like those bosses drop some good items from the chain itself. So you want people doing that chain. And so those items will become valuable. And so you have these different metas in terms of the economy changing, right? Unguro, maybe not as valuable. It makes me a little sad, but right, like the Asilithus might be a little more valuable. Camping the Imp in Winter Spring, that is a choke point on that quest that spawns that rod every once an hour. Probably shouldn't be telling people this, but right, like that becomes a sort of a major choke point in the quest. And so there could be some interesting encounters around where these quests occur, where people are really trying to, kill the Dukes to progress along this quest chain, right? Like, I think that there is an opportunity for some new dynamics that we haven't seen early on.
All right. We'll come back to a few things you mentioned there in a little bit. Jerome, mate, I mean, overall, how have you been receptive to the changes, but then drilling in on what's been the most favorite thing that you've heard over the last few weeks and what's your least favorite change?
Well, a lot of these things were things I've wanted for a long time. Probably my favorite change would be the Soul of Iron change. So adding in sort of a tracking icon for hardcore players. It's something we've had in RuneScape for a long time and kind of gets us closer to the whole idea of high scores and like tracking players and their achievements. I think that's really, really cool. I think RuneScape did a really good job with the Iron Man system and the hardcore Iron Man system. So I think that's something WoW could have easily done. Very little dev work for that, but just something that means so much to the people doing hardcore. And of course, the more mechanics for raids, I think is really, really good. Goes hand in hand with adding more herbs and stuff in the game world. Because if you're going to make the raids harder, you're going to have to give more consumables for people. I think more mechanics is awesome. Just giving people, something new. I think going back to the same old Molten core would have been a little bit boring for me. Having some new mechanics is really awesome. And of course, I think finally the faster ranking is really, really, really welcome. I think anybody that's ranked would agree that the rank system is probably one of the most burnout inducing systems that can be in a video game, because once you're halfway through, you can't stop or you lose all your progress. So it's the kind of system I think had to be changed. It's not in any of the other WoW games. It's just such a burnout inducer. So many people that got to rank 14 in the first couple phases, they didn't even play after that pretty much. So, I mean, you could just directly look at the people that ranked and then see like it wasn't a great system for them. And probably my least favorite change, this is just a small one, but the Diamond Flask nerf. I think Diamond Flask was so broken in Classic, it was insane. Like, you could go into Alterac Valley and camp the cave by yourself and kill like 8 people in a row, no problem. And you're just regenerating the full the whole time. Completely broken, but a lot of those small little changes, I will stick up for my good friend, the Real Esquire, as well. I think there had to be a way to make mage boosting still viable while also letting people, be encouraged to be in the open world. I don't know if it would have been a gold thing or what, but it did seem a little bit like, I don't know, it was kind of sweeping changes to get rid of all forms of mage boosting, it feels like Maradon, for example. There must have been a middle ground where we could have still seen that. And because it's very high skill gameplay, right? It's not easy. The average person can't do it. So there had to be some kind of middle ground to keep everybody happy, I think.
All right. Just want to. What was that, North?
Defending mage boosting. Never have I
saying,
ever,
okay,
Jerome.
there's a lot of
I like Esquire
players.
too. Esquire.
You've got these high skilled players that they're kind of just like, they just lost an aspect of the game. And I'm not saying I'm not a fan of the AFK boosting, but there had to be something that allowed them to showcase their skills, right? Like it was a skill cap thing, you know.
For sure. I mean, right, like, and there's still some forms of boost available, right? You still can, right, like boost in Stratholme and BRD, for instance, right? It's going to be a lot less available to people because there are now, like, you know, sort of stringent timelines on it. If you don't kill them within 30 seconds, right, like now, right, they will come and they will murder you, which is now, right, so Maraudon is essentially impossible, but, right, like that kind of gameplay, as much as, right, like I have a lot of respect and admiration for those mages, I think that, I don't really think they were the problem when it came down to it. I think people like, and maybe it's rude of me to call people out, but I forget his name, Aristeas.
You mean Arleus?
Arleus.
Arleus.
I have, and he seems like, you know, well, there were some interactions that I saw him have on stream,
he made boosting
which were
really
kind
accessible
of
with his guides, right? Like everybody watched his
which
guides,
I think was, which is why I kind of hold him in a lot of contempt. Right, like when you make something like that very accessible, as much as it's like, oh well, now the people can do it. Right, and then the people abuse it. Right now, everyone's making mages. Now everyone's AFKing and boosts. Right, before he had made it popular. Right, it was a thing that streamers weren't going out of their way to teach people how to do, and so it was a high skill cap thing. It wasn't, hey, let's boil this down to, you know, exact steps to get you to do it, right? Because people got frustrated and would leave, right? But, you know, he made it accessible, and in doing so, he made it a problem.
If I can say, North, if I can just jump in, North, I think you've had a bone to pick with him for quite some time, because you were on the show, God, I want to say like a year ago or something, and I think you brought this up again, like not quite in this much detail, but like I've got no drama going down this path, because it actually raises a really interesting question for me when you do start to talk about, like, you know, the things that go unspoken and, you know, getting information out there, whether or not it's a good or a bad thing to make all this stuff out to the public.
Myself with the multi-boxing, because it was just sort of, you know, I was making it much more known and publicly known, and in a way, you know, you can argue that, you know, more people did it because I was doing it. And I don't know, like, I think if you're a content creator, you're kind of, your number one asset you have is teaching other people stuff, right? So if you can make a guide that's going to last on YouTube for, you know, 3 years, that's your best thing you can do. Like, your people are going to see those mage boosting guides for 5 years. That's really valuable as a content creator. So it's kind of hard to tell people not to do that. I don't know. I just felt like there had to be some kind of middle ground so that we could have
the balance that I found that I really, and so the thing that I really disliked, and ultimately why I found myself exiting content creation primarily, was that I found that the things that I could do best and the things that I could relay best were almost always guides. And so it removed the social atmosphere of actually teaching these people. The most lucrative thing that I could ever do was not streaming on Twitch, it was making YouTube guides. You know, that would get, you know, hundreds of thousands of views, which, you know, even when I had like no YouTube subscribers, you know, I made a single like dueling guide before Classic launched, and it, you know, got like 300,000 views or something in like, you know, a couple weeks. And that was, you know, that blew my mind, because people really, really wanted this content, because they really, really wanted to understand how to approach the game in that manner. And I'm not
disclosure, I would actually watch your dueling guide right now. That's the kind of thing that's evergreen, right? That would last forever. Like, people
and
still need those.
But I think that's the problem, right? I think that's the problem. It's right. Like when you prioritize, you know, at first when I made that video, I was like, oh, I want to share this with people. But then once I made money off of it, I was like, well, now I want to do this because I want to make money off of it. And now I'm encouraged to sort of divulge things about the game, right, to try and alter its atmosphere. And right, like at one point, and then am I sacrificing the integrity of the game so that I can make money? And so then I think you enter into a weird situation where, you know, Arleus, you know, he's incentivized to share all that information. It will give him good views. It will make him more popular. It will give him, you know, like a lot of money just from the YouTube ad revenue, right? But it damages the game long term. And I thought, okay, right, me posting these BIS lists, me making a guide for Molten Core, me making a guide for Blackwing Lair and how to DPS these encounters, what gear to get, everything like of that nature. It removes the social aspects of the game where people are going to their friends and being like, well, how do I play mage? What am I supposed to be doing here? And they're like, oh, well, no, we can go to the North guide. We can know what the BIS list is for this batch. Oh no, we can go, to this guide and we can find out how to DPS in this situation and that situation. And so it removes the social aspects of the game for me, at least on a small level. I'm not saying every single person would have watched my videos, right? But if they get it popular enough, right, then you begin to sabotage, I think, content creators' social dynamics that are naturally there and are naturally really healthy and positive, I think.
It's a really interesting point because I'm sorry, Nano, I'll throw it to you 1 second, Matt. I just want to say this. It's an interesting point because you raise, like, part of me, North, is sitting here sort of thinking, oh, is North just doing the sort of the petty gamer thing where we go, don't divulge my secrets. That's how I make gold, man. But more of me is with you on the point that you just made because, I've watched Arleus's guides. Don't get me wrong. I like the guy. I like his content. But I can see what you're saying in that there is a greater sort of structure that he's somewhat not tearing down, but like, even though he wasn't the only guy making guides, his was certainly the most popular, and he might have had, and probably did have, quite the hand in swaying the way in which the player base approached the game. And now so many more people had these mage alts doing all this craziness that ultimately led us to the path of Blizzard actually having to fucking nerf the thing.
Here's the real question. Should content creators have that sway in general? Not just him. I'm talking like myself. I'm talking every content creator. We all have a huge impact on what is happening, right? Hardcore is currently a thing because of the content creators, not because of Blizzard, but because of the content creators, because they were the people that stuck with Classic were the hardcore players. So the question is, is Season of Mastery, it's kind of for the players in a way. Is that the way we want the future to be? I mean, I think I'm okay with it. I think
it comes down to
let Nano get in.
For sure.
Yeah. So, before we jump into that, I had one thought on the mage stuff, right? So I'll answer Jerome's thought on the content creator and influencers and all that the new economy that's going in now. But for Arleus, Arleus is trying to make some money, right? He's trying to make a living, and I don't blame him for making guides. Who I do blame is Blizzard not finding out how to fix pathing so the 200 mobs in Scarlet Monastery can figure out how to walk over a small ledge.
Great point.
And not make that pathing and the ability to do all those kiting possible whatsoever. Like, there's no reason why the crocodiles can't hit up a little bit on the ledge of the rope in Zul'Gurub, but Blizzard can't figure out how to fix that, and then all of a sudden, Joker D can farm 51 to 60 in 4 hours because he's able to do that. Same with his, there's so many different places that it's just pathing abuse, right? And then that enables an entire economy of mage boosting. But if you fix the pathing abuse, then all of those things go away. And then Arleus doesn't have an opportunity to ruin the game for mage boosting because the original problem is fixed. So it's not his fault that he's trying to make some money with something he's discovered in the game. It's the fact that Blizzard is incapable of fixing small pathing issues. And you get those fixed and those problems go away. So that's where I would lay the blame for a lot of mage boosting. And, ultimately the problem is that with mage boosting is that it left the world devoid of people because mage boosting leveling was so efficient that you would just buy Chinese gold and sit in the dungeon all day and AFK watch YouTube videos while a mage levels you, instead of being out in the world in STV and engaging in combat potentially or just in the rest of the content. So that's the real problem, the gameplay influence, which is why I'm happy that mage boosting is being nerfed. I think it's pretty aggressive in how they're doing. It's going to impact normal groups, especially when you get to the Stratholme and 3 people have died and you're trying to kite mobs back and stay alive and scrap and claw to kill everything. But I would have been just fine if they just nerfed the XP gain, but we'll see how that plays out. In terms of the influencer economy, that's where we're going with everything, right? I mean, we've always had advertisements having celebrities telling us that this is the best yogurt you'll ever eat.
I think Bajir was in a Super Bowl commercial or something for a while, a long time ago. That's right. That's just how it is.
So I don't.
Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's do you think that people having that influence is a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, it's definitely is happening, right? Because hardcore is the community. It was a community thing, right? It was never, Blizzard didn't seem to really be into it at first. They were kind of, I don't know. I don't know if it was going against their business model or whatever.
It does depend, doesn't it? Because North, I'll throw it over to you. Jerome, when you asked that, and sorry, Nano, great points, by the way, and I do totally agree with you. It just raises the age-old question, really. Do you hate the player or do you hate the game? But
I think it's got to be the game. I don't think the players are always going to find a way.
Yeah.
I mean, I did the same thing. I'm completely in that same boat.
I think it comes down to, right, like whether or not you are cognizant of your effect on like the people around you and how you're playing. Because, right, like I, like personally, right, like I saw what you were doing, Jerome. And like I, on the surface level, right, like, with multi-box.
I understand.
And I was like, well, this is very, very powerful. Is there a way that I can do this, in a way that is, more expressive of the way that I want to play the game, where I can control 4 mages very, very, like very in depth and not, not as much of a Zerg, right? Like a lot of your streams. Yeah, a lot of your streams appeal with sort of like the brute force power and like, sort of the rodeo of you corralling all of the characters that you had, which was very, very entertaining. And I loved those streams. And so I was like, maybe I could put my own spin on it. And I like, after doing it for a little bit and after getting my characters to a level where they could PvP, I realized that it was, for me, it was an unfair advantage, right? Like I could do things that other people, that one person perhaps should not be able to do, right?
Yeah, and especially now playing TBC, I kind of understand that at this point. Like, if I'm going to play the game, it's probably going to be 1 or 2 characters, but I don't know. It was a time and place thing too.
It was really fun, right? But I think that you have to, and like for instance, so was the when I was playing on Stalag initially, and my guild would camp Blackrock Mountain, and we would kill people, and we killed them over and over and over again, and we would kill them. Right, like, we would kill them like 10 to 15 times before they could get in the instance and delay their raid by like, over an hour, right? Like,
sounds like you were killing me because I was the one getting delayed. I was just trying to get into the freaking BRD for like an hour and a half.
Yeah, exactly. And so we enter into these situations in which, right, like we, behavior that is ultimately, right, like viscerally at the time fun, right? But like, I think that considering what impact it has in the ecosystem, right? Like when I transferred away from that guild ultimately, and made my own Ungrobulus afterwards, and I would still go in the mountain, I'd still PvP people, but we would kill guilds once. We would try and remove their world buffs, and then we would move along our way, right? Because we didn't want to, right? If they had no world buffs, we would try and kill them once, and we'd let them move along their way. We didn't want to grief the hell out of their experience. We wanted our PvP, and we wanted, the contention and sort of the strife, but we didn't want to legitimately ruin everyone's night. So I think like having a healthy balance of, okay, right, like, is this a sustainable thing that I'm doing? And I realized when I like looked at the BIS guides and if like looked at the AoE content that I was also beginning to produce, because that was what a lot of people wanted to see back phase 3, phase 4 in Classic. They just wanted to see people AoE farming. I was like, is this a sustainable thing? And ultimately I didn't think that it is. Also, I think that as much as it's like, oh yeah, there are pathing issues and that's the reason why the AoE farms are so good, you can do them without them though, right? So like as much as it makes them easier and more accessible, I think making them harder is better. But like SM, you can do without the pathing exploits. Much harder, you can do it without the pathing exploits. Right, Maraudon, you can do it without the pathing exploits. Is it much harder? Of course. Are the huge pulls probably impossible? Maybe, but still basic boosting, very much possible, right? So a lot of these aren't just solved by pathing issues. ZG also doable without the pathing bugs. It's again, harder, more challenging. For sure should be. And maybe that's the middle ground, but I think to just say, oh, well, it's a pathing issue that Blizzard can't fix or hasn't taken the time to fix is a little naive, because people were doing it on private servers without these specific pathing bugs, when the mobs would just do the things that you're saying, Nano, when they would just attack you through the bridge, when they would just, attack you over the wall. They wouldn't just, run around when you jumped on a little post, right?
Yeah, there's a few things. The big difference from private to classic in terms of that is that the experience in dungeons and dungeon mobs was like 2 times more on classic than it was on private servers. So this wasn't the efficient way to level on private servers. And so people really didn't do it, at least not to the degree. Now everything got turned up to 11 in classic, like the parsing meta, the speedrun meta, like the mage boosting meta, all of that got turned up to nth degree for classic. But yeah, are they possible? Yeah. Are they, I certainly encountered a ton of bots running Maraudon and ZG and those kind of things. And if they're fly hacking already, then they can probably do whatever. But your average player isn't going to be able to consistently, flame strike, cold kite Crocs all day, every day
That's true.
in ZG, but they can certainly jump up and down on a bridge pretty easily. So there's a big gap there, but also like the one nerf that hits that best is just reduce the amount of experience if you have a level 60 in your group that you get in the group. That fixes a lot of the problems.
Yeah.
One last thing, North, I'll get you maybe to finish up on this one, but I'll just guide you in the right direction and we'll move on after this. But, on the point that Jerome raised, I believe, where he said, obviously, inevitably, we are so deeply rooted in a modern society now that is built around the age of the influencer. Whether you like it or not, we are there. So is that a good or a bad thing for things like World of Warcraft? I think in instances, it can be a bad thing. Not necessarily in the areas that we're talking about, like, Nano's touched on and stuff. Like, I'm all for the guides and the, hey, look at this funky thing I did. It's kind of wacky. Now you can see it because I did it. That's all fine, whatever. I think you start to get far more dangerous and, whether or not you call it toxic, where you start to see large influences come out. And I'm on the smaller scale, and I've been criticized in the past for doing things, adjacent to this, where you do start to get your personal opinions on the ways in which people should play the game out there. When someone with 1 million YouTube subscribers comes out and says, you know what, rogues are dog shit. Do not play them. They can't do X, Y, and Z. No one should ever touch them. End of fucking story. And then that actually puts like a noticeable dent in a class's population for a release of a game. I think there can be instances of negative influencing. So North, I'll get you on that point to kind of just wind us up on this one. And then Nano, I'll come back to you on some changes stuff.
So I think the biggest example of that, I think that it to answer Jerome's question and to answer your question, I think it depends, right? Like when you have really good influences, right? Like I think Cargos is a great influence on the community, and I think that
Absolutely.
he is very light-handed in the way that he tries to influence things, and yet he still gets things done, and he gets things done that are really, really positive for almost everyone. Right. And so Cargos, like, and with the hardcore community, obviously Jerome mentioned this, and right, I'm just trying to tie the knot there, right? Like that's a really, really positive influence. And I think that you are a similarly positive influence where you try and listen and you try and learn and right and really, like get opinions out there without necessarily, platforming ones that might be dangerous, right? Like you are a diffusive sort of, personality. And I think a wise personality in the space that we have. I think Nano is very similar, right? Like a lot of the things that Nano says, I immediately agree with, right? Because right, like he's obviously, a very intelligent man. He's been doing this for a long time, and he's a very thoughtful man. And so I appreciate those opinions. It's when you get people who are a little less thoughtful that I have problems with, because you mentioned it to Nano and you were like, oh, like, well, the no changes crowd. And Nano was like, well, I was never no changes because being no changes was stupid. Right. And Nano saw that. And right, the people who were on the nose, people who were on the money from the beginning saw that was a stupid thing. Right. They saw that that entire movement began from a moment of, hey, let's not add LFR. And then people took it to mean we got to re-add batching, which just right now are completely different things. But again, I think that it's, it's a little bit of the plague of the influencer, because the people who were spreading it, right, didn't really understand what it meant. I think Asmon did initially, right? But I think the people who then adopted sort of into his little coven didn't really understand what they meant when they said no changes. And so it literally morphed to actually mean no changes at all, which is just ludicrous and blindsided and just completely, irreverent of the fact that Blizzard is going to develop their game. There are going to be changes, right? Even it being in a 1.13 state, right? Which is, being on the last patch, their custom patch, that is a change. It's not launching on 1.0. Right, that is a change in of itself. So you have to ask yourself, okay, what are the changes going to be? But the influencers, right, pushed this idea, and right, people were foaming at the mouth, and they were lapping it up so much to the point where they believed that no changes was the way to go. And so we got Classic, for the vast majority of which had batching. Right, we got Classic, where we had like untouched problems like phase 2 ranking, right, like from the get go. Right, like in the world when, entire servers just, like died in the blink of an eye because they weren't listening to the fact that system didn't work back in the day. Right, like the fact that they released the system as well with dishonorable kills made no sense, because back in the day there was no DK system with that, and that was the only really reason that system had any degree of sense. But also it was toxic because there was no DKs. So you have the system and this ecosystem that doesn't work because people are pushing an idea fed to them by influencers that they don't understand because they're not being thoughtful about it. They're repeating a catchphrase because it's popular. I think that's where it becomes dangerous, where people are actually closing their eyes to the things that they're advocating for and are just trying to parrot a popular opinion.
Yeah,
I think that's when it gets bad.
100%, when it becomes closed discourse and not open discourse. To a certain extent. Nano, let me throw it over to you, mate. And really well done, guys. I was really, really sort of loving all of that. But Nano, I'll just throw it over to you and actually ask Jerome at the same time. Fucking, did you hear North buttering us up there? You know, if he wants to take us all out, he can just ask. He doesn't have to be subtle about it. Jeez.
North can take me out to dinner anytime he wants, but he has to pay.
Nano, I can't
With all
remember.
his mage boosting gold, he has to pay.
Exactly. Nano, mate, I can't remember if I got round to asking you the same question I threw at North and Jerome. Did you get your favorite change and your least favorite change in there?
I got mine in. I don't know if North did.
Yeah, I don't think Nano did.
I didn't. So my least favorite change, I probably also agree with North. The summoning stone stuff can be pretty dangerous to the way the game is played, and it influences just that day-to-day interaction of the world that is so important to Classic. My favorite change is just buffing MC, and the removal of world buffs goes along with that. I've been an anti-world buff guy for a very, very long time and been beating that drum for a very long time. I think the game is significantly better without world buffs, and so we'll see that tested in a way coming up here with Season of Mastery. So the increased difficulty of the raid encounters, I don't think it's going to be phenomenally difficult, but you're not going to clear the new MC in 30 minutes. Maybe it takes you an hour and a half, and I think that's fine. So we'll see how that runs.
In a hypothetical world where this thing just looks to be a boatload of fun from the get-go, and everyone's running around doing their raids and having their fun in a new MC and, you know, doing all the consumables, but all, you know, not the world buffs and stuff. I'll throw this out to everyone, guys, first in, best dressed. I'm just thinking of the major rhetoric when this thing was first announced was, you know, no world buffs, enjoy your death trap, ladies. Everyone's saying that everyone would quit. It won't be fun without world buffs. You're all fucking idiots. Well, I guess to get to a specific question, do you believe that this will actually be a fun, ongoing environment more than a month beyond release, even without world buffs?
I think it's going to be good. Yeah. I mean, you look at world buffs are going to be a big problem if you're going to try to make the content harder, right? Because if you want to make the content harder, I don't know who here did progression rating, but when I did progression rating, every wipe in Nax, we had to go back and get buffs again, right? So you'd go back and rebuff for 4 horsemen or go back and rebuff for KT or whatever it was. And that's not going to work if you have to rebuff for like Molten Core, for example. People would just quit the game. I mean, we already see, I think the biggest problem with TBC, I like TBC, biggest problem is the long resets between each pull. You look at retail, you can reset in a couple minutes. It's much easier. The systems are there to refresh your skills, for example, your battle reses or whatever. That's not in Classic and not in TBC. So we can't have world buffs if you're going to make the content different and harder, because it will just cause people to quit because of the amount of time between each pull, right? And yeah, I think it's the smart change. It has to be done if we're going to make the content different and do a Classic Plus.
Yeah, I think the push for pro world buffs got pretty warped towards the end of Classic because it seems like everyone, like half the population, had rerolled to be a warrior in some way, and being a warrior with full world buffs was apparently the best thing in the world and akin to taking crack cocaine. And
mate, it's better than sex. Have you tried it?
Yeah. First it's free, and then you have to level your own horde.
Guys, I've just got to talk amongst yourselves. I've just got to take a 2-minute call, so I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Oh, well, I'm going to talk about how I got full world buff and then died in the first spider pack. That was
great.
The
first spider pack death is something that you hate, right? Like
it happened multiple times to me. Yep.
It happened to Marky Mark 2 weeks in a row when we were raiding and on Horde side at the end of Classic, and it was just like, ooh, because your entire raid is just ruined.
As a carry, right? I went as a carry, and then I would die more than like the people that were supposedly like buyers, and I don't know. It was just like the trash packs always got me. I don't think I had a threat meter, right? And I was playing warrior with full world buffs, no threat meter, just going in. And, you know, if it worked, it worked. But sometimes I would be deathless, and sometimes I'd die like 8 times. So it's pretty variable.
Gotta ride the lightning, right? Like that's the.
I mean, now I have a threat meter, so I think I'd understand it better. But
I think that when it comes down to it, though, I think it's and I'll like if Josh asks me, I'll probably repeat this later. But like I think it is so much better when you can log on and just play versus like
I'm
having that period where you're like. You log right, so TBC is nice for that reason, right? You log on,
that's
you go grab your consumes, and then you go play. And I think that's one of its biggest strong suits, right? Because with Classic, it's like, oh well, are you on 2 days prior getting your world buffs, right? Did you get MC, right? Especially as Alliance, right? Did you get MC for your Word Chief's Blessing, right? Like, did you go get Dark Moon Fair and then get summoned by the 8 different summoning spots? But now it's going to be like, hey, right, like. I think there's going to be some meta for world buffing in terms of world PvP because I think people want to like enter the mountain safely, and so I think that there's going to be some meta because I think people will if they said that they're keeping the Chrono Boon in. I think,
I don't think.
And so
is there going to be a Chrono Boon? Really?
There is going to be a Chrono Boon.
They're still going to keep it in.
Yeah. So and I think that's a good change because what's going to happen? It could be a weird change. It could be a weird change because people could be like, oh, you get ganked once, and then you're like he hasn't even seen my true power yet. And you pump the Super Saiyan button, you go full world buffs on them, and you just murder them, right? Like that could be
that sounds fun.
That could be the meta. And it also could not be, right? So like there's a bit of, and you wouldn't be able to see unless you're a mage that they have that Chrono Boon on them typically, right? So it would be a difficult change. But I think a lot of guilds, right? Like it'll be like a case of, hey, we're gonna all buff together one day of the week, maybe after raid we all buff together, and then we Chrono Boon that, and then that Chrono Boon could last you for weeks because it could be like unboon your buffs, we're going to raid, and then you get successfully to raid, you get outside, you reboon your buffs, and then you enter the raid, right? Like so I think that could maybe be the approach that people ultimately take.
You're saying we could get 4 raids worth of use out of those buffs, just
exactly. And so exactly, and so the world buffs would ultimately be for the world, which I think is such an interesting, but it is. I think it would be interesting having the world buffs be used out in the world. And
I'm kind of seeing already some abuse in Battlegrounds, though. People are gonna pre-made pop them, and that's gonna be a mess. There's gonna be because you can just save your buffs for pre-mates, right? You would just only pop them against pre-mates. Mm-hmm. I wonder if they work in for Battlegrounds. I don't know if anyone thought about that yet, but
I think they do.
I'm so sorry, guys.
Maybe they shouldn't.
I'll look forward to coming back and listening to that little bit when I produce the podcast.
I think you just discovered something about Battlegrounds that's going to be around later.
Solly, I've never done that in 4 years of podcasting. It was just an important call from my doctor. So I've been getting fuck all sleep lately, so I'm trying to take some decent sleeping tablets. Guys, let me move on to, we'll lighten up a little bit now. And now that that was awesome. Some good heavy stuff there at the top of the show. I'll get everyone to sort of kick back and relax a little bit now, and we'll have some fun and talk about what we're doing in Season of Mastery. Now, Nano, I might start with you because I actually have no idea what the answer is, whereas I think I can guess with the other two guys. Mate, what are you playing? What are your plans?
Yeah, so I am going to dip my toes in the hardcore challenge. So I'm going to go on Obsidian Edge, play a Gnome Warlock because that's my bread and butter. That's what I do. North is a mage. I'm a Warlock. That's just a fact of life. So I'm going to do that and try the hardcore challenge for the first time. I never did it in the original Classic. Didn't do it in TBC. So I'm going to try it here in Season of Mastery, and I'm excited to try it out. And it's going to be there's going to be a lot of people doing it. The community has been built up significantly. It's really cool to see everything that's come, Cargo's and team has built to this incredible community. So I'm excited to be a part of it and see how far I can get. Now, I'm a Warlock, so I'm pretty good at leveling anyway, and I have done this a few times, so I feel pretty confident that I'm going to do pretty well with this challenge, and I'll make it
going in blind.
Oh yeah, no guides. I don't need a guide. I am my own guide for leveling and for everything.
That is bold on a class that doesn't have Frost Nova or Blink. I commend you. Commend you, my friend.
I gotta say, Warlock is kind of hard until level 40. I would say, once you have SL, once you have everything, you're kind of set. But those early, first 25 levels are kind of rough.
I probably won't do SL. I leveled up in Classic, and I don't think I died until Stranglethorn Vale in a PvP encounter, and I was just doing
Nano ain't no bitch.
and just like bonding everything down for all those levels.
One of the
There we
things I
go.
always found interesting about Warlocks and private servers, Nano, that you might know a bit more about, is one of the more regular comments you see popping up on old Reddit threads is how much difference there was between the calculations of Voidwalker threat on private servers versus what we got in Classic. Anything from you on any reasoning behind that, or is it just one of those things?
I mean, on private servers, like on the QA team, you try to emulate everything as best as possible, but on numbers-based stuff, like, how are you supposed to figure out what the threat values of Torment are supposed to be from 2005 when you're in 2021? There's no resources out there for that. Even if you try to watch the video, you're just guessing. So you try to do your best, but Voidwalker is terrible in Classic. Like, it's almost not even worth. The only reason why you should learn the Voidwalker skill, in my mind, is so you can sacrifice it and give yourself a bubble. I guess if you really want to go SL and like be super tanky and never die, then you can take that. But I think
Voidwalker is not very happy right now.
I think it is so interesting that in reality, right, like that the Nost team and like the Nost core, in terms of the values of the Blueberry, got it so wrong, but it felt so much better as a result of you guys getting it wrong, because they were like, yeah, it's a Voidwalker. If someone is doing damage to the target, the Voidwalker should be able to keep threat off the Warlock. It's the tank pet. All that makes sense, but it's just not true.
Yeah, the hunters pets can tank. Why can't the Voidwalker
exactly.
tank?
Why wouldn't the Warlock? But in reality, the Warlock pets are just they're shitty little sidecar boys. So like they're just supposed to be bad at everything except for their one ability, which for Warlock and Voidwalker is sack.
The Voidwalker in TBC is very strong and probably has the values that we used on Nostalrius.
Interesting.
For the vanilla version of it.
Interesting.
So,
right. Yeah. Hey Jerome, how about you, man? What are you playing? What are your goals?
Oh, just like Nano and everybody, I think I'm going to be doing some hardcore Obsidian Edge, doing the Road to Rag, and it looks like a lot of fun. I'm going to be making a Druid and kind of battling that because I don't really think Druid healing has a lot of place in Molten Core, but I just figure if I get to 60 without dying, that's honestly good enough to get a raid spot probably. So I'd rather not die. I think Druid's pretty safe choice. Done it. I haven't really leveled a Druid very much in hardcore, but I mean, I did Warlock before, and I like Warlock a lot, but I don't know. It's probably going to be a lot of Warlock, so I didn't want to go. I've done it before, so it's like not something I wanted to do twice. And I'm also making a Rogue, so I'm going Rogue. I talk to Sarth a lot, content creator Sarth. He's great. He has some really hot takes that Rogue will actually do really well in Season Mastery, especially with the 0.5 armor day one.
Will, yeah.
And not to mention, Warriors will actually be worse than before because world buffs gave them so much rage, right? So Rogues will be less affected by that. So theoretically, especially like a Horde, like, with Windfury and everything, it's going to be great for, I think Rogues will do great. I don't know, maybe Alliance Rogue would be better, but overall, I think I'm happy with Rogue as my second character, my PvP character. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Here we are back north to the self-fulfilling prophecy and the fucking douchebag influencer content creator, moving the needle by what I'm about to say. But, on what Jerome just said, I've already said on the show that I'm quite convinced that every man, woman, and child is going to be playing a rogue. And I said, it's funny because I go, I'm not going to be shocked if there's like overall somewhere between a 20 to 22% population of rogues. When ordinarily we'd see 17 to 18%, and 20 to 22 is absurdly high. But I think we're going to get there. And then as soon as after I said that, granted they're incredibly small dip samples, but some of these polls that we're seeing coming out, a couple did put rogues in that sort of 21% range. But North, if I could just ask, everyone's obsession with rogue now, it's so funny because again, on the show, I was guilty of having guests on who poo-pooed rogues through TBC, and now here we are building them back up again and going, fuck, it's going to be the age of the rogue in Season of Mastery. Do you agree?
I think it'll be the age of the dwarf warrior who decides to use stone form to crush the rogue. Realistically, I think that's the big meme. I think
it'll be the age of a lot of heroic strike canceling, which most people don't like to do. So most warriors will be terrible. So
also true.
Well, it's moved my decision north. Like I'm maining a hunter, And I'm a big aesthetics guy.
Remaining a mage.
Well, I was going to have a mage as an alt, which is still the plan. But
hell?
I'm famous for changing my mind, and I knew this would happen. It was going to be maining a mage, and I was going to have the hunter alt. I literally just flipped them and went, I'll go with the hunter again. I'm sorry to disappoint you, mate. But in regards to the hunter, I was like, you know, I'm a big play what you like guy. I'm not as big on the min-maxing. I love me some Night Elves. So I was like Night Elf Hunter. And then as time went on and I started playing more and more Battlegrounds on the beta, and the fucking ridiculous amount of rogues that I saw, I actually went, fuck, I think I'm going to play a Dwarf Hunter just for stone form. And, you know, I started playing around and I enjoyed the look of the dwarf more than I initially thought I did. I actually have fallen quite for dwarves.
Dwarf Hunter is such a vibe. Like,
it's great.
OG trailer, like clout, like, come on, man.
I can't believe I was so down on it for so long. I played like 10 hours on the beta and went, this is actually really fun. I love this little dwarf guy. But anyway, what I'm getting at is I changed my whole plan purely around a prediction of how many fucking rogues are going to be out there. Is anyone else having anything else they're doing affected by this?
Oh, I just got affected. I was going to play Warrior or something else. I didn't know what I was going to do. Sarth just sold it on in like 10 minutes. He was like, yeah, play Rogue. It's the right choice. And I think pretty much if you think about it, Rogue's like the perfect DPS, I think.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves, right? Because are all these rogues going to level to rank 14? Because if there's 7 or 8 rogues in your raid and they're not rank 14, they're going to be wearing, you know, potentially blue weapons from Ubers until AQ.
Oh, no.
because you're going to be zooming through these instances pretty quickly, and the drop rates are not that great for the weapon upgrades. Like, you may never see a Viscag, right, in the entire year of playing Season of Mastery, and so you may be still using your rend weapons until AQ, and maybe you finally have that AQR drop and the guild disbands because all your rogues fight against each other and all quit because they didn't get it. So that's a thing to be careful about if you're going to roll rogue or warrior, is that these weapon drops, so unless you're going for rank 14 and get the guaranteed super OP weapons, like, it's going to be tough out there.
Hey North, did you enjoy the part where you came on the show, you know, 5-6 weeks ago, and we were talking about Molten Core stuff and potential changes, and I remember you sort of lighting up and thinking, God, how good would it be if they just did multiple living bombs? And then that's exactly what we got. I mean, just quickly on the Molten Core changes that you've seen in the encounters, are you happy?
With the exception of the last 2 bosses, yes. I think Golemag could have gone farther also. But generally speaking, yes. Right? Like, you don't want to make it too inaccessible, and I understand that. I think the rag changes could have been a little more extreme. And maybe like minded in a different way. Like, obviously there's potentially multiple submerges now. There's always the 1 force submerge, to my knowledge. I don't know if there's 2 force submerge. I haven't really looked into it that much. I don't want to super understand it before I go in. I think, like, over reading is, kind of lame at this point. But like, I would have liked another cool mechanic, not just, oh, hey, this is how rag was originally intended, right? Whereas Baron Geddon is crazy, right? Like, it's a crazy fight now, but rag isn't. Rag is, it's kind of par for the course, which is fine, right? But it doesn't seem, compared to the other ones, it's not as crazy as the other ones. And so I would have liked a little bit of flair. Maybe something like a lava spout would be interesting, right? Akin to Lurker from Serpentine Cavern, right? Where
what about a hole in the ground where you can just like fall through and die while you're fighting rag? That'd be cool. Like, you get punted into a hole. Like, I just came up with that on the spot, free. If you want to implement that,
like the pit in fucking 300 or something.
yeah, exactly. Just put that in the middle, like, and rag's just like on top of it.
You can even have. I think there are room for cool mechanics in rag. Maybe I didn't think of any in particular. Maybe I didn't offer any really cool ones. Maybe I offered the coolest one that I offered was the multiple living bombs, and so they ran with that. But yeah, barring, I'm largely happy with the changes. I really like the Sulfuron change is one that I think is very minor, but is actually a really good change because it's more akin to the original implementation of the fight, where now they all share health, so you have to continue kicking the Dark Mending. You can't just kill one instantly and then kill the second one. You really have to understand the assignment, and it also is great because mages can AoE throughout the fight now, not just at the beginning. So it'll be a challenge to actually keep that much mana up and running.
I have a theory that even with like 8 rogues, the kicks will still be terrible on most guilds. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Probably.
Probably
It'll be really
all their energy on Sinister Strike with Blade Flurry up.
It'll be really interesting to see like that dynamic moving forward. In terms of like the rogue changes, I'm really interested in seeing how it affects the economy, and so that's the thing that I'm really looking forward to. Like, I'm not, I'm a mage. I'm not really scared of rogues. So it's not like a particularly challenging, matchup to deal with unless you're dealing with a very, very skilled rogue, and most people who play rogue aren't very, very skilled. But when it comes to their approach now, they will want that Dark Mantle, and maybe Dark Mantle is something that really does edge over. I haven't played like a lot against the rogues with a lot of Dark Mantle. Maybe it does make daggers that much more threatening because of the energy regen, right? Because they have so many just sort of empty globals doing nothing. Maybe Dark Mantle will push that over. It seems too RNG to work, though. I don't think it'll actually be, be that much better than rank 13 gear, but we'll have to see. But right, they will be going for that gear no matter what, and so it will be sort of a shift from the Ungoro meta where you're going to see, people want dinos because dinos are the thing that you get. Whereas now it's going to be, okay, well, people are going to want rank gear, and people are going to want Dark Mantle. So I think that the shift in economy and the shift in camping, the shift in priorities in terms of where people are going to farm, it's going to be the fire elemental invasion in Ungoro, right? It's going to be burning steppes and potentially other zones that have a lot of sungrass and have a lot of goldthorn. And so there's going to be a lot of areas that should be livelier than previously, and so that's going to be the area really where you're gonna find yourself more often as a result of these rogue changes, I think, in small parts. So I think that is what has changed my mind in terms of what this rogue boom sort of will do for me.
Guys, on the one big thing that came up in the last few days that I haven't really had a chance to ask anyone about is the tribute changes. It did ignite a bit of a conversation about services in game, and obviously WoW this has been on the tip of everyone's tongues in the last few months. I think there was a couple of days there on Twitter about a month or two ago where everyone was talking about this, exacerbated by the fact that Mike Ibarra was on Twitter talking about, his guild or group selling dungeon runs as well. But the nerf, people saying it's not really a nerf, but the change coming into Dire Tribute now where you can't sell the goods to someone unless they're on the tap list of the boss. Were you guys surprised by this? Do you applaud it? Do you think it's a bad thing? Anyone jump in, let me know.
Darmal's always been really good for raw gold, right? It's like you can vendor the stuff, you can sell it to other people.
Yeah.
There's tons and tons of gold to be made. I think they're trying to limit things that you can just lock yourself in an instance, right? They nerfed the pickpocketing and BRD as well. Just like at anything you can, mage boosting, of course, anything you can just kind of lock yourself away and just you're not in the game world, I think they want to get rid of. So, yeah, I mean, it kind of fits with all the other changes. Whether people agree with that or not is another story. But I think it's, if you're going to do, two things, why not go for Dire Maul as well? Why not? If there's going to be hunters just locked in Dire Maul for 18 hours a day, maybe that's not good for the game.
Nano, let me ask it to you this way. There are really two there are two limbs to this argument. And I think both sides are both equally passionate, where you kind of go, side number one says you want it, you earn it in an MMO. That's sort of, the purity side where items should only go to someone who completes a dungeon, quote unquote, correctly, get it the usual way. Then there's the second crowd that sort of says anything should be available within the economy of a game. If it's serviceable, make it that I can pay money for a service to obtain whatever the fuck I want. I'm more of a first crowd type of person. I am more of a bit of a fuckwit who's like, if you want it, you should fucking put in the work to get it.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm against things like GDKPs and the selling of tarnished elvish rings and things like that. Tell me where you stand, Nano, or what you think of it in general.
Yeah, I'm more on the side too of I'd prefer to see players have earned all the items that they have in their inventory as opposed to being boosted or whatever. I think this specific change for Hunter Tribute doesn't make that big of a difference about a month into Season Mastery, But with Dire Maul being out at launch, it then enables hunters to just park themselves in Dire Maul North and everyone to get their pre-bis items almost freely, and they just probably have to pick between all the hunters spamming that they want to sell a Tarnished Elven Ring and trade chat or whatever it is. So I think it's more of an eye of looking at this launch period of Dire Maul Tribute and not seeing everyone just, completely kitted out and all their Dire Maul North stuff within a couple days. So, but in terms of the economy, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. One note on this is that on Nostalrius, we actually tried to change the king encounter so it wasn't soloable by hunters at all.
Interesting.
Where we attempted to buff it because it was a major source of gold inflation in the economy. We nerfed a number of different things that were within instances that were being botted that we could, help fight against gold inflation. So we actually buffed the encounter to make it pretty much impossible. People still, really good hunters could still do it, but the average hunter couldn't anymore, and we were satisfied with that change. So I would be on the camp of they didn't go far enough, because I like targeting all the in-instance gold farms as possible and force everybody out into the normal world to have to earn their gold. It would be my preference.
Well,
this is why I love Nano. This is why I love Nano. Everything. If it's not about warlocks, everything that comes out of his mouth is pure gold.
I'm okay with nerfing princess too. I don't need warlocks to farm princess.
For sure. No, he's consistent, right? Like, and you want that so much. Josh, what were you?
No, I was just going to throw it to you, so go carry on, because I just want to know where you're at. When we just focus, like, if I get you to focus in on this whole, like, because this is a big talking point right now, going like instance farming, if we've gone after one, should we go after all of them? Players get really bent out of shape about this. And I think the majority of people are like, don't fucking touch my ability to farm gold in an instance. And North, I'd love you to go nuts on that point.
So I think people I think people have like sort of like something of a Stockholm syndrome to these like inflationary farms, and they don't quite understand them. On one level, yes, right? Like, it does increase your it does increase the accessibility of gold for you, and it's not for everyone, right? Especially if it's a hunter specific farm, makes it so that not everyone can get it, right? Eventually, people, if it's good enough and if it is powerful enough people will make alts so that that's no longer the case, at least within the hardcore circles. So it sort of balances itself out, but only around the players that are willing to put an enormous amount of time to have this farm. And so it just begins to inflate the economy more and more. And so, right, your consumes that should cost much less gold, right, cost a lot more gold, right? It sort of justifies itself after a while, because, right, like, if you can make all this money, ZG, AoE farming just for raw gold in phase 1, things begin to cost more and more money. Whereas if most of the gold that you get is just from doing dungeons, right, like, and actually just out in the world killing mobs, right, like, things are going to cost a lot less, and so these farms are a lot less justified because there's way less inflationary mechanics in the game, right? So I'm confused as to why they didn't go for this farm, right? They nerfed the ZF farm, right, which is less powerful for gold than tribute. And maybe there's not a lot of people doing tribute, but I know there's a lot of hunters that bought it, right? It would have been I think a better solution long term. Right? They went for the pickpocketing as well. So like the botted farms and really the shitty farms that are like very inflationary and very bad for the economy, they went after those, but they didn't go after tribute, which feels weird because it greatly affects the availability of mana potions, which it's nice because they become cheaper, right? But become
or Dire Maul
maybe
East.
a little too cheap. Dire Maul East, so it's a different problem, I think. It's a slightly different problem because it's less inflationary, because the lashers aren't like the private server lashers, they don't drop as many grays. And so mostly you're out there farming herbs, right? But it's the same thing with jump runs, right? Jump run is, incredibly inflationary again, in part because, but it's inflationary for some items, right? It's for arcane crystals and large brilliant shards, which maybe shouldn't be as accessible. It's going to be a huge thing. Large brilliant shards
and now for Black Lotus.
Yeah. And so for and potentially, right, like the Lotus drops that are in there, that should be adjusted because, right, like it's going to make it potentially too accessible. Arcane crystals are going to be a lot more valuable now, I think, early on, especially because of the tier 0.5 quest, large brilliant shards as well. And so this stands to sort of make things a little weird because most classes can, I believe Mage can solo farm it. I think Warlock can solo farm it. Right. There's obviously the, like the Warrior Plus that can duo farm it. And right, but I'm a Nano's camp, right? Why are you, if you're targeting the mage farm, and I think you should, Why aren't you targeting the farms that keep people out of the world, that keep people doing dungeons for the wrong reasons? You should be doing dungeons with your friends to complete the bosses, right? And if you can do that as 3 or 4 people, that's fine. I don't really see an issue with that. And so like the 2-man jump runs, I don't see as much of an issue with. But in terms of solo jump runs, they should probably be limiting that, right? Solo content in dungeons for gold seems like, generally speaking, a bad idea. But if you're going 2-3 mages in Strathholm, you probably should be able to farm it, right? Because, you're doing group content as a group. But if you're doing non-group content as a solo, right? If you're doing group content as a solo person for money in a place that no one can mess with you and it inflates the economy, right? Probably should be next. It's a little tricky, but probably should be next.
We have counterplays. If you're in the open world, there might be people try to kill you, or they may make an alliance, or whatever it is. There's just so much more interesting, and I think it also drives people to play more, right? I think PvP drives people to play the game more, and having, maybe an alliance versus horde beef, for example, it keeps people logging in and not raid logging. And if you're just in an instance, I don't know, it doesn't do the same thing to me.
Yeah, any in-instance farm that exists that players can do, bots can do better, and maybe not better, but they can do it longer than you. And so, yeah, if you have a bunch of grays that drop from the Lashers in Dire Maul East, well, bots will do that 24/7, and there'll be an army of them, and the value of everybody's gold will go down significantly over time. Same thing with tribute. So, with Dire Maul East, like, I would love them to remove the guaranteed 2 thorium veins at the 1 to 2 thorium veins at the end of the instance. If you remove those, then all of a sudden, like, those blues only vendor for like 8 gold, 10 gold. Like, it's not worth the time and the effort and the difficulty to do that. You go out in the world and you're more efficient instead. And so any instance farm that they can nerf, I'm all about, because like Jerome said, like, when you're out in the world, one, you're incentivized to log in, and when you're logged in, you're having these, random encounters with other players. That is the World of Warcraft. That is the massively multiplayer online experience. That is the best. That is the best experience that you can have in this game. Absolutely. Is the random encounters that you have with other players. And so anything that incentivizes that, I'm all for.
I'm with
it's
you.
It's what MMOs do better than other genres, right? It's that immersion experience that we crave, right? Like, and as much as it's not about, right, like, you shouldn't tell people how to play, and I get that, but like, this is what MMOs have offered best. And if there's something that they should offer better, right, like in the genre, it hasn't been made clear to me yet. But right, like that is just such an obvious thing, that the interactivity should be at the forefront, and they're encouraging it in some ways, but then falling short in others, which seems a little half-hearted, maybe a little indicative of a lack of understanding. Most of the changes they make, I think, indicate an understanding, but maybe these send a mixed message, I think.
Now, I'm with you guys, but Jerome, could you imagine the fucking reaction from the community if they came out tomorrow and said they've taken away DME farms?
I mean, I don't know. There was only a few streamers I saw doing them consistently. I mean, maybe Salve, and he was really good at them, Salve Dale, but I don't think there were that many people doing DME on stream. It was a lot of people that were, I'm not going to say botting, but people that I didn't, weren't streaming.
I feel like it became a very popular farm.
I mean, maybe. I feel like most streamers, most content creators fell back to mage boosting. That was kind of the thing. Or Hunter, soloing Dire Maul North was pretty common as well. But I didn't see a lot of the jump runs. Not nearly as many, I don't think.
Fair enough. Hey guys, I mentioned Black Lotus, so I do want to ask about that. I've been a really big proponent of the Black Lotus change. I was really, really hoping for it. I mentioned it in a few back channels. A bit of an RNG chance on Black Lotus would just be fantastic. And I think, in my opinion, I think they've done a really good thing. But fuck, what do I know? I'm just your average dad gamer. People are throwing out the concept that, like we've just touched on as well with the bots, bots will eat Black Lotus for breakfast now, even more so than they were before, because they can go out into the world and just farm any node and hit those chances 24/7. Do you believe, like, obviously it's going to be differently perhaps on a PvP versus PvE server, but do you think that whilst the change is a good one inherently for the player base to a certain extent, it does actually work in the bot's favor, or not necessarily?
I think less so, right? Like, if people are making it out to be that this is like a change more favored to the bots, they're kind of crazy, because, right, like, those bots, they're gaining most of the Lotus supply if they're situated properly, right? If they have the scouts that are, like, they're botting there that are, just like ready to pick up the Lotus that comes, right? Like, and they're instantly like underneath the ground, in a lot of cases just teleporting to the Lotus spawn and then picking it up, right? Like there's no counterplay there. And so because the supply is so limited and because general players just running around grabbing herbs can't get these Lotus because they're so camped, and this is mostly only on high pop servers, right? You have less of supply in the hands of the actual players. And because the supply is more governed by these players botting or the players that are, potentially like moffing it up or, like really hardcore camping them, it just becomes a lot less accessible, and it almost always is a gold cost. Most people are going to buy their Lotus. Most people are not going to farm their Lotus. And so making it more accessible generally, even to the bots, is a change that's good for most people. And it favors the bot less so just because there's no longer a stranglehold that you can keep with bots that just teleport to the node and then sit underground and herb it.
So I think that's a great point, because like there were times when I'd see a Lotus and then somebody would like walk backwards up like a hill to get it. And meanwhile, the bots weren't going for normal nodes, right? They weren't going for like a random plague bloom or whatever it is. So I think this is the right way to solve that issue. Another issue people don't talk about very much is the muling issue, where with server transfers, a lot of people on very low pop servers would bring Lotus over to high pop servers every week. You could just, move them to another character. And so there wasn't really this control. Like it would kind of artificially, like, you could bring over Lotus and generate wealth that way as well. And I just think, I don't know, there shouldn't be items consumables for raids that cost that much gold. I think we need to lower the cost of raiding, especially if you're going to make raiding harder. So I'm all for making Lotus significantly more available.
I also think that with the change to world buffs, right, it becomes less of an issue. For casters, it's still an issue, for certainly, right? But for melee, it becomes less of an issue of, okay, like, well, I need this flask because this flask is going to keep me alive. And if I'm not alive, I'm useless, right? Like if I die a single time, I'm useless, right? I think that drove up a lot of the price in terms of what, in terms of, right, like Flask of the Titans. And so the Lotus price was deeply related not only to the supply, but the demand of all these melee that wanted to consume Flask of the Titans in order to keep themselves alive. So with that going away, right, with maybe, oh, hey, I chill a little bit easier, chill a little bit earlier on this fight, and, like I'm not as, zug, warrior, full world buff anymore. Maybe that becomes less of a necessity and the supply increases drastically, but also the demand, at least a little bit proportionally, will drop, I think.
Okay.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, you're not going to need those health flasks, for example, as much. So yeah, the prices should go down, hopefully, and that's good.
I think this is the right move for the raid difficulty increase. If the raid's going to be like just what you said, Jerome, if the raid's going to be more difficult, and it is going to be more difficult, that means more people are going to die, especially because there's less world buffs, and so you have just like a 30% less health pool. And so consumables are going to be more expensive, so therefore the balance of that is make them more plentiful, right? So as demand will increase the supply. I put on a different server than you guys did for the majority of Classic, especially like Fairlina. My understanding is that there was a lot more bots on Fairlina, being one of the most populated vanilla servers or Classic servers. I was not on the most populated one, and we didn't really experience Black Lotus bots, but we did have a Black Lotus Mafia that controlled the entire supply of Black Lotus. I have two competing schools of thought. I like the idea of players being able to create that dynamic content within themselves, but I also think it's really bad for the average player. So the average player is going to benefit from the fact that Black Lotus is going to drop from any of these things, but they're also going to lose the excitement of seeing any actual Black Lotus spawn, which is a loss. It may be a small loss for people and not worth the benefit, but it is a loss. And those mafias are going to go away because there's no way you can control the supply of every single Lotus spawn in the entire world. Or every single herb spawn in the entire world. It's just not feasible. So I think it's good for what they're doing with Season of Mastery. I'm on board with it.
I'm with you, and if I can somewhat not necessarily represent the average player, but give you the point of view from an average player, I'd herb a lot. I saw 2 the whole time in Classic. So whilst I lost my fucking shit, and I got one of them, and the other one I got killed at the last second by a hunter, and I've never forgotten it, and I hope that person is fucking just in a world of hurt somewhere. But I just got pipped for the second one that I saw. But it's one of those things where, yeah, it is a hit, and I understand what you're saying, Nano. It was very, very exciting to see. But I'm a little more comfortable with the slightly less exciting but more prevalent thought of RNG popping up for you and being like, oh, hey, would you look at that? All right, that's cool. I don't know. It's a little thing for me. But guys, we're on the home stretch now. I won't keep you much longer, but I just ask a couple more questions, and I'd ask this same one to all three of you. Discounting new content, discounting player changes. What's one change that you would have loved to have seen with Season of Mastery that we didn't get?
What do you mean discounting player changes?
So they don't count. So no, not talking about class changes, not talking about new content, right? Because that would be like the easy answer for a lot of people. Oh, I hope they bring in a new dungeon. Oh, I hope they give fucking paladins a taunt. Forget all that stuff. Any sort of in the vein of the medium to small changes that they've made, what's one thing you wish they'd done that they haven't?
I've got a good one. It's just that, I mean, it's inevitable, but the whole achievement system and maybe a high score system as well, similar to RuneScape, where we have, achievements for collecting certain items or collecting every weapon or whatever it is, stuff that each season, like somebody can be at the top of a leaderboard and it's just very well known. And I'm talking like more than Warcraft logs, like something officially Blizzard supported and maybe, I don't know, even prizes or something, just making it much more of like, maybe you can have a completionist segment of the population. Right now, there won't be that with Classic because it'll only be a year, and why would you bother doing that? But I think they could add, like, the whole achievement system was apparently leaked a long time ago, so I don't know if that would come in, like, a future Season of Mastery or what's going on there, but, like, this is definitely something I want to see is, like, achievements, more completionist stuff, because that's a whole segment of the population not really being addressed right now.
The funniest part of that would be having like a leaderboard for most gold earned in a week or a month.
Yeah, you could do
and
that.
then having people just buy the gold to get on top of the leaderboard.
Okay, now, well, yeah, I mean, true, but I mean, you could have anything. You could have.
Yeah, I know. I'm messing around.
You could have like boss clear times, whatever it is, just on this big Blizzard official leaderboard.
North, Nano, how about you? What are your suggestions that you didn't get that you would love to see in either this season or next one?
I was really disappointed with the fact that they really haven't, like, there was I will actually be shot if I mention that. I can't mention that, but like I was really disappointed that they didn't add. I'm. You didn't ask me what I was doing, where I'm going. I'm playing on hardcore, and I'm going to play on Jom Gabar at the same time.
Right.
I'm gonna play hardcore a little more casually.
Uh-huh.
But the Jom people would shoot me if I mentioned that change, but because it didn't seem intended. But the change that I really wanted to see, and this is like such a pipe dream, was with the increasing availability of elemental fire. I really wanted to see like more fire elemental invasions, because that was some of the most fun that I actually had on private servers.
Right.
Was when Northdale actually got that right. And I expect it still will be a thing, right? Like it still will be a valuable farm, but with the increasing availability generally and not in these limited areas, it doesn't create the same kind of mafia, sort of potential wars over these resources.
So killing mobs in a certain area rather than picking from nodes.
Exactly, right. And so I like the resource-based, right? So with the intrusion of 0.5 and rank here so early, Devilstar becomes less important. And I think that's generally fine, but right, like it removes again another really cool resource that you can war over, that you can limit, that you can, like have battles over, which I think is a really interesting dynamic to have. And I think that we don't have one. I think if everything were, I think if there were more resources like Devilstar, right? And so that, it's not just, oh, hey, there's one mafia. No, right? There might be, a mafia for the earth elementals out in Silithus, and there's a mafia for X out in Y area. And like you need only those earth elementals drop a specific thing for some kind of raid gear that's not necessary, but is cool and effective. And you need it for, to make dark iron gear or something. Right? So you have a series of those where these mobs drop things that are unique to them in an area where people can try and control that resource. I think that's such an interesting dynamic at play that is really not capitalized and sort of is accidentally utilized with Devilstar, but then never actually really seized upon. So I would have liked to see more of that, right? More resources that, right, you can control, and not in a dearth of them, right? So it's not just, hey, there's this one thing and you can't enter into Devilstar, and because of that it's, insanely profitable and insanely expensive and really, really toxic. No, like there's a bunch of resources that you could choose. Hey, like, am I going to join the Elemental Fire Guild? Am I going to join the Elemental Earth Guild? Right? Am I going to, it becomes a sort of choice at this point. It's like, who am I going to try and get in with to try and, be a part of this, sort of industry that sort of sprouts up around a resource being controllable.
It's like Captain Planet. Pick your element, man.
Facts, right? Like, I think that would be such an interesting dynamic if there were, if you needed for like, maybe for head enchants, there was, maybe pristine black diamonds only dropped in a certain area, or you had to mine them in a specific mine, and so people would try and preserve that area, right? Like, or any number of things, right? Like maybe essence of water only dropped in a specific lake, and so you tried to keep that lake under wraps. I think that would be an interesting dynamic.
Very good. Nano, how about you, man?
My change would tend to be around the honor system. One, I would love to see them just revamp the whole system for Classic to begin with, because I think I mentioned it earlier, but the honor system is terrible and awful game design that encourages degenerate and completely unskillful play. But outside of that, I do have a concern that the PvP gear that you can earn is among the best gear that you can have in the entire game. From basically like the first people will hit rank 14 on like week 6 or 7, I think, if the math works out right. Mm-hmm. And those people are going to use weapons probably until at least next Rammus, but maybe through the entire season of Mastery that they get in week 6 or 7. And they're strong. They're on an equivalent level of AQ gear at the very least and next gear at the best. So that's a concern of mine. And not many people may know this, but there's 2 versions of all the PvP items, both the blue set, the purple set, and the weapons. There's 2 different versions of each of those items. And the first versions were weaker, including the weapons. And so my preference would be that they would use the earlier, weaker versions until AQ patch rolls around, and then automatically upgrade all those items to the stronger versions when the AQ patch hits. And then make available the additional rank 14 weapons that were added during the Nax patch available in the AQ patch. So it's a little nitty gritty, and it would be difficult to communicate what was exactly happening to the players, but it would not throw the game balance out of whack in terms of weapon accessibility from the rip. So that's my big concern, is that the availability of those huge PvP weapons and PvP items, even the blue set for Warlocks, is like the 2-piece is still going to be, actually it may not be best with the 1.10 items. And it's going to be close, but like the blue set's really good for casters. The purple set's really good for melee and for hunters, and the weapons are good for everybody. And they're available from like week 6 on. So that would be my big concern, and using some progressive itemization for the PvP items would be my change.
And even the mage set, right? Like if you leave it untouched, even sans the weapon. Obviously, the weapon is essentially an AQ weapon that was only available in Nax patch on. But the gear itself is BIS until you get like almost all of the off pieces from BWL, and so most mages will just sit on that gear while it's given to people who haven't ranked. And so you just sit on this full set of gear that gives you hundreds, if not right, like it's likely, I'm pretty sure it's thousands more health than like a normal PvE set that a mage would want. It really is thousands. And to really no downside, where you become like this, this tanky god, for really no reason. Early on, I obviously, I like that because I'm a mage, but it's a little wonky. It's a little bit wonky when you're going to keep that gear, and like you never replace it for what it's used for, right? You will use rank gear. You will use the 2-piece for rank 13 gear all throughout Nax. Right? Like you want the shoulders, and I believe it's like the shoulders and the helm for trash at all times, just because it's better than anything else. Like you just want it for the stam set, and it's almost as powerful as anything else, right? So
if you go hard, you get it week 5. So
yeah, exactly. Which is it's a little ridiculous, right? If they had made it like a rating system and they'd really gated it over a long period of time based on like rating, there were the number of things that could have slowed the progress, still made people feel good to get like individual pieces at a time without making it as ridiculous, so that maybe they, by phase 3 they have this gear at the earliest in its entirety. But now it's going to be, week 6, I'm going to be, in my Super Saiyan mode, which is a little ridiculous,
North, do you know why you're my spirit animal? Because you unironically, cheekily drop in a sans in your point, which I just think is brilliant, and I love you. And boys, let's go out on a big note here. Look, like I said, we're about 20 hours away from release now. I could not be more excited. Guys, talk to me about the setup, the man cave. What have you done? What's launch day going to look like in Casa del Norte?
So I have I have made a ton of chicken and a ton of cooked a ton of spinach and cooked a bunch of pasta in preparation for launch. But I don't even really think I'm going to. I don't know why I like meal prep. This is not like a normal launch. I'm just going to go to. I'm probably going to go to 30. I'm going to PvP a little bit on day one, and then
you're on the race to STV, aren't you?
Yeah, so
it's not the road to rag. It's not the road to rag. It's the road to Nessingwary.
So we're gonna do that. I'm gonna keep my toes out of dungeons for as long as possible. We're probably gonna go in for a little bit of gear, and do some nice stuff. But it's mostly gonna be questing for us. And it should be fun, right? Like I'm looking forward to the PvP. Hopefully, we again, right? Like I talked about this earlier, and I touched on this when I used to stream. I touched on this a lot. I think behaving sustainably is really important to the group that I'm playing with. We're not out here to try and kill the server, right? Like if it becomes clear that there's too many people camping in SCV, we'll try.
You're like the bears
right?
that when they're fishing for salmon and you're trying not to overfish because
exactly.
Oh
like I don't want to kill out the population, and that was really important to me on Grobulus, and it's important to me now. So right, like if it so happens that I have to take a BR2, BR3 spot, God forbid.
That is the best analogy, Jerome. I fucking love it.
Yeah, if I have to take a lower standing week one and delay my PvP gear slightly, I will encourage everyone to do that, just because I think that the long-term health of the server really should come first.
Aren't you a good egg? It's because there's not enough people like you is the reason that I'm going PvE this time instead of PvP. But it's hard because people will min-max the fun out of it, right? Like people will just people will overfish, and that's the problem. Is when the game mechanics don't prevent that kind of overfishing. I think that really is like that is a dev problem, and I've admonished the developers of the game. It's a very old game for not having better ways to encourage PvP in a healthier way. Yeah. I think it comes down to the way the ranking system is organized, and Nano really touches on that. But when
we can do our best.
As Hunk put on last week's episode of the show, and I kind of sort of baited out of him, like it seems to be in 2021, the smooth brain response is, imagine complaining about PvP on a PvP server, but there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, imagine wanting a healthy server in 2021. Yeah. What a fucking long shot. What a nerd for wanting that, honestly.
All right, Jerome, talk to us about the setup you're going to have. What are we doing? Are we doing quite a long gameplay session on day one? We got pizza, we got beer, we got.
I hate to say it, but those long streams are behind me. I mean, I've pretty much destroyed my back in the last couple of years streaming. Like, it's been bad. Like, I've been sitting in these god-awful lawn chairs, and they're just not.
Have you upgraded your chair?
Nope, still lawn chairs. Still, I actually think they might be the devil. I'm not. Do not buy a lawn chair and sit in it for 2 years. Your back will just betray you. So I don't know. I might not go too ham. Maybe like 8 hours. But my mom got some pizzas. We got some frozen pizzas. I try not to go too crazy. And just I don't know. I'm old now and I've got injuries, so it's kind of hard to play 30 hours a day.
Oh, please. You're still a legend, mate. All right, Nano. You're, Nano, we were talking just before I started recording, and I think, for me at least, you certainly do conjure up the image of the wife, 2.5 kids, white picket fences and everything, and somehow balancing a World of Warcraft life on the side. Tell me what launch is going to be like for you, my man.
Yeah, so it launches at 6 p.m. Eastern time, which if anybody listening has children knows that that's probably the worst time to try to play video games, because it's dinner time and then it's dinner time and then bedtime, and then typically it's wife time until the wife goes to bed, and then I get time to myself, and then I make it all work by not sleeping very much ever. But my wife is going to be very generous to me and allow me to play. So I'm gonna play at launch until TBC raid, and then I'm gonna raid, and then after that's done, I'll get back on for a little while, and then I'll work on Wednesday. So I have a pretty normal life, and I fit well around it, and that's kind of what I'll do for launch here too.
Well, mate, your kids are old enough now to start asking questions, right? Like, they might not have been old enough for the launch of Classic, but now here we are just over 2 years later. Do you get the question? Like, Daddy, why do you love your Warlock more than me?
Or what about, Daddy, why did you disappear into that computer room for 45 hours? What happened? Where'd you go?
Well, they're used to it now because they've been working from home for a year and a half. But
Daddy, why do you play the worst
my daughter is all about
class?
it. my daughter is all about it. She has like a level 7 priest. She enjoys it. She actually
Fucking
hasn't played it for a
casual.
little while. We're more into like Stardew Valley right now. That's kind of the gaming du jour in our house.
I do love
playing
Stardew
together.
Valley.
Yeah, it's a great game. Beautiful game to play together. But yeah, so
That's
she
awesome.
really likes to die wolves. That's what she calls it. I like to die wolves.
Has your son
which
asked?
means
Has your
smiting
son
them
asked
to
why?
death.
Has your son asked why you called him Shadow Bolt?
Yeah, come on, Fell Hunter. Let's go to school. But yeah, my kids know it. They're familiar with it, and I'm actually today I was fixing up my old computer with some spare parts that I have lying around. I still have a 970 NVIDIA card lying around, so I'm gonna fix that up and have a second PC where they can really start getting into some real PC gaming and not the Switch gaming like
Oh yeah.
like
And
all
by
your other
that,
friends
you
do.
mean fishing for you in your downtime.
Or farming Dreamfoil, ideally.
Very good. All right, guys. Look, I'll let you go on that note. Thank you so much for being here. We'll go through one by one. Shout out who you want to shout out. Plug all your stuff. Everyone, please do go and watch these lovely gentlemen if they will be streaming the game, which I have no doubt they will. Jerome, tell people where they can find you and shout out anyone you want to shout out, mate.
Well, I've been streaming, but really focused on YouTube right now. Got a YouTube channel. It's NoHitJerome. Got tons of good classics, season mastery stuff. So if you want to see more like season mastery tips and stuff, it's over there. So it'll be pretty sweet.
Very good. And Nano, mate, go for it. Any streams from you? Any more YouTube videos?
I actually think I might stream for the first time in 2.5 years since the classic beta for this launch and for my raid tomorrow. So if you want to check me out on Twitch /NanoNost, you can do that. I do have a YouTube channel that I started working on, NanoNost as well, but I don't upload all that much because it's hard to make content and have a normal life and do everything else.
It is. It's fucking.
It is.
It's time consuming. People have no idea. Like if you have a job, how fucking difficult it is to be a content creator.
Yeah, it's hard because all you want to do after your long day is just sit down and not have to engage with anything, and content creating forces you to do that. I will ask if anybody from Method is listening, can we please get Jerome one of these Razer chairs?
Yeah, I know,
I've
right?
seen them around.
Get him
I have
anything.
Scott. I can call Scott for you.
A bar stool would be a
if you're
fucking
back-
See if we can
great.
get you a Razer chair.
If your back is actually right, like if it is like lower back, I'm guessing it's like
upper
low back issues.
It's my
It's
shoulder.
upper.
Where, the arm on
Upper.
like touching the mouse. Like if I had it down the whole time, it'd be okay. But it's like my arm's always out, right?
So I would if you can manage the trip out. Obviously, you're gonna be busy the next few weeks, but I would go and try out an embodied chair from Herman Miller if you have the money
Really?
for it.
Okay.
You can buy it secondhand, and it's it's a couple $100. They're harder to find than
Not
the
to get
secondhand
off topic,
Aerons.
but I had a really bad used chair experience where I bought one and it was like, I don't know, dude. It gave me asthma or something. It had like cat hair in it. It freaked me out.
Ooh.
Anyways, sorry to get
Ooh.
off topic there.
Yeah.
Used chairs scare me now. I'm very scared.
So, but
The reason why
I
call out the
really
Razer chairs because
I
Jerome
would
has a
invest.
rotating thing from Method on his stream where people
No,
can
no.
click a link to buy the Razer chair that he doesn't even have. So let's get
sitting
that,
in a
let's get that
plastic
fixed.
lawn chair while everyone else is getting discounts on the Razer chair. Come on,
Great,
people.
dude. The
I'm
chair's
thinking
about to
of
break, dude.
you guys. This is a dated reference, but some people listening will know. I'm thinking of Homer's sketch of a time machine, which was basically a lawn chair with an umbrella attached. That's kind of what's conjuring up in my head. But
I just need an umbrella.
North, yeah, exactly. North, mate, you mentioned again before we started recording that you are contemplating a cheeky return to streaming. Is that right?
That is right.
Ooh.
I think that it's time to dust off the webcam and and get back in it. I think
Got to
I
get
think
all
I've
that
got a fresh
Vaseline off of
perspective
it.
this time. Yeah, I don't think I'll be streaming quite as much as I used to. I think that finding a balance is important, and I think that the mistakes I made before was it was trying to be live consistently more than I really should have been, to try and make the consistent content. And I get that that's the grind, like that's how streaming works. But I think I'm going to focus more on like the quality and making sure that it's that I'm up to fun things. So if you want to check out my stream, it is, twitch.tv/NorthTheMage. I'll mostly be playing on Jom Gabar, a little bit of hardcore thrown in there. I should think. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Very good. Gentlemen, it has been an absolute pleasure. I wish you nothing but the best of luck and all the 6-slot bag drops you can get in the first couple of hours. Just have the best time, guys. I know I'm going to be having a blast. And have fun.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Josh.